Today we're going to be looking at Nobody's Fool from 1994, written and directed by Robert Benton, based on a novel by Richard Russo, and it stars Paul Newman as Sully, an independently spirited 60-year-old man who starts to recognise that maybe he has a place in his community, and it's our Christmas special.
So before we go any further, more than perhaps any other film that we've discussed, we just recommend you just stop and go and track down a copy of this film. It might mean you have to do that illegally because the studio hasn't released it in any format for about 20 years. But you should watch the movie before we talk about it, because A, because it's better than listening to us talk about it, and B, because it's a fabulous movie that you should experience fresh.
And I'd say, obviously this is going out mid-December, ready for Christmas, so the ideal way to watch this is to eat a massive plate of food, have a couple of beers, be like 2/3 awake, and just sit down and watch the movie.
I would scale back on the food if it were me, because I'd be asleep within 15 minutes. But I would say definitely have had a beer and then have a strong drink halfway through, just to give you that extra cushion.
Yeah, and leave your phone elsewhere for this one.
Absolutely. And then come back and listen to us talking. So yeah, I was a bit wary suggesting this one.
Yeah, this is your Christmas recommendation.
This is my Christmas recommendation, because it's a hard sell, because it's basically just a small, beautifully crafted but unobtrusively crafted feel-good movie.
Yeah, but I mean, it is really intricate. The details in the plot, that things that are set up that just feel like they're throwaway gags, and they all pay off later on, and without any big hurrah or fanfare. Every little payoff is just a warm.
Yeah.
It's like somebody just squeezing you a little bit tighter in a nice Christmas hug.
I saw this one. It was a recommendation from a friend, somebody I knew from university, who was much older than me. I think I was in my 20s and he was in his 40s, and he had like a wealth of film knowledge that I was just happy to bask in. So he would always recommend great movies and we'd watch them, and I remember absolutely loving it. We watched this on tape because it's a few years later, but we did go and see Twilight.
Oh yeah, I really like that. I watched that recently on Amazon.
Yeah, I haven't seen that since then. I've got it on DVD somewhere. I picked up in a charity shop, but I keep meaning to go back to it. I should have done for this really, but I'm ill prepared. Okay, so this, I thought this was a great one to talk about, mainly because it's disappeared off the face of the earth. And I didn't know much about it until, even having watched it, until I, did a bit of research. But again, it's just a strange world that a movie this good by a well-liked, well-reputed director that got a Best Actor and Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar nomination.
Yeah, that's right.
Can disappear off the face of the earth. Like, the only reason I was able to watch it is because I've got an old DVD. It's not available to rent anywhere on Amazon or iTunes or anything like that.
It's an outrage.
It's an outrage.
It should be like on Christmas watch lists all over the world, instead of people watching Die Hard for the umpteenth time at Christmas.
Groundhog Day again.
Yeah. This feels like a really classic American Christmas tale. It's a proper blue-collar story about how the relationships between people that live in a community affect each other. Yeah,
and it's it's all about real people, and it has without being overtly Christmassy. It needn't necessarily happen over Christmas and New Year, but it's just part of the fabric of the background.
It's just one of the wonderful choices that they've made in telling this story, that it takes place over Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year, and you barely see any of those holidays. You never see any of the usual trappings.
But I mean, because it's set in winter in upstate New York, it's constantly snowing and chilly and cold. It's got that lovely, beautiful, crisp kind of snowy photography. It feels Christmassy anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if it isn't kind of explicit.
Yeah, but there's no like sleigh bells. You get some fairy lights. You see one Thanksgiving dinner in the background, and that gets trashed, and not in like a National Lampoon type way. It's just the side leaf on a table gives way. It's all really nicely judged.
Yeah, and something that's as strong and emotionally affecting as this, you would have thought it would have built up a reputation through word of mouth, through anyone who's ever seen it. Because for me, I really liked it the first time I saw it, and then some years later when I got it on DVD, and then subsequently watching it again for this, it's just you move to tears with little moments, and the more you get to know it, the more moving it is.
Yeah, that's it. Repeat viewings are rewarded. I watched it, first time I've seen it was last week, and the second time I saw it was this week. And just the second viewing was much more rewarding than the first one.
Yeah. So are you a Robert Benton fan?
No, I wouldn't say so. He seems like, a good kind of solid journeyman, doesn't he? He's, been a reliable pair of hands for decades, it looks like. Obviously Kramer versus Kramer is the one that pops up on the list, and I have seen Twilight recently, as I mentioned. So, yeah, just a solid craftsman, it feels like. Nothing showy.
I've read quite a bit about him recently, not for this, but I read that, and I've mentioned it before, that Pictures at a Revolution, about the 5 Best Picture candidates.
Oh, yeah, okay.
For 68.
He's in there as well.
He's in there because he and Leslie Newman co-wrote Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, yeah, okay.
They didn't write it as a studio project. They wrote it, and then eventually found its way to
Arthur Penn.
From what I read about him, and there is kind of interest in French New Wave and that sort of thing. He was more of a kind of aesthetic director. He's kind of more interested in film aesthetics and film art at the beginning of his career. And there's a really good... Sorry, I've got this little quote here from When the Shooting Stops, which is Ralph Rosenblum's... He was a film editor. It's his tell-all book from the early 80s.
Oh, okay. An editor's expose.
He cut one of Benton's first films as director, which is called Bad Company. He described it as...
I really like that.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, it's really good.
He described it as an action western with no action.
Yeah.
Let me see. I was disappointed when I saw the first dailies coming back from Kansas, and I think Sam Jaffe, the producer, was nervous too, for he sent me out to the cornfields for added insurance. I spent a few days trying to discuss with Benton the photographic coverage we'd need for an adequate assembly, but I found myself engaged instead in a conversation about aesthetics, lighting, composition, and other fine points of photography, all the things that I generally consider the secondary aspects of filmmaking. Raise my eyebrows a little bit there. Benton was all fired up about film theory and art, rather uninvolved with questions of drama and action, whether the picture would actually engage an audience. When it came to the edit, I found that Benton was completely unwilling to entertain any ideas about the overall feeling of the film. I mean, Ralph Rosenblum is famously grouchy in this book.
Sure.
But I think at some point in his career, like, Benton learns, obviously, with Kramer versus Kramer, right. He's moved beyond that and moved into telling stories that involve people quite...
Yeah, I mean, with this, he's definitely in with the characters in Nobody's Fool. You're in looking at them, but he also still has that kind of nouvelle vague brevity of storytelling. He's not jump cutting, but he is time jumping quite confidently, between a week here, a month there, and an hour, he jumps all over the place, but it's all very confidently done.
And there's only a couple of moments in it that I mean, we'll come to them a bit later on. There's only a couple of moments in the film that kind of stand out as kind of like, film art. The rest of it's fairly, straightforward storytelling, but it does, as you say, it does have that kind of confidence. And
what do you know about Richard Russo, the original novelist? I kind of did a quick Google and saw that a lot of his stuff, his Pulitzer Prize book, Empire Falls, is a kind of blue collar.
Almost nothing. I know nothing about him apart from what I've added Nobody's Fool to a wish list with the thought of reading it, but I'm almost scared to read it in case the voice of the book is different to the voice of the film and somehow affects how I perceive the film.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't want that perception to change.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit, I might have to see if I can find it in an actual shop and read a few pages to see what the tone of it is. And it's quite interesting looking at the rest of the credits that everyone involved is an absolutely solid pro.
The cast and crew are all really solid, aren't they?
Yeah. I looked up the editor, John Bloom, who was brother of Claire Bloom, actress. But he worked his way up from minor British movies in the 60s, like The Party's Over with Oliver Reed, via Georgie Girl, and then to bigger productions like The Lion in Winter.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then he worked with Attenborough on Magic. John Badham's Dracula in '79, French Lieutenant's Woman, Gandhi.
All right.
Just really, really solid.
Yeah, they'll do, won't they?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, nice CV.
DOP John Bailey, again, incredibly solid CV. Films with Lawrence Kasdan, The Big Chill and Silverado.
Oh yeah.
Interesting work with Paul Schrader, American Gigolo, Mishima, and Light of Day.
Yeah.
And then I looked, just as an aside, I looked at his more recent films, and they have very little in common in terms of who he's working with, but they all seem to be about life lessons for late middle-aged men.
Okay.
Like, you look at the synopsis of about 4 films in a row, and it's all about somebody in sort of middle-age, late middle-age, facing some crisis over a few days that'll teach them some serious life lessons.
Maybe he's on a journey.
Or maybe he just enjoyed doing Nobody's Fool so much that
that's it.
He wanted to make that again and again.
The composer's Howard Shore, isn't it? He's quite big and bombastic usually. He's almost got it right here. It's maybe it's my least the thing I enjoyed least about the film is the score.
Absolutely.
It's a bit too obvious.
Well, I remember Howard Shore. Obviously, I grew up listening to Howard Shore in Cronenberg movies.
Yeah, he's done everything, hasn't he, for Cronenberg?
But at this stage in '94, I think he was established as the king of fear, because he'd done all Cronenberg stuff, and he'd also done Silence of the Lambs, which everyone remembers, and he's just about to do Seven. So I think with this, I feel that he's kind of like stretching his wings a bit and doing something
taking
a bit
breath.
different. Yeah, and I do agree. I'm not going to argue too strongly against it, but it's not my favourite part of it.
I mean, it is a Christmas movie, but it is like also.
Yeah, it's a little bit of kind of Irish pipes in the background. That's a bit.
It's getting ready for hobbits and things, isn't it? Just getting warmed up.
Who else? Should we talk about the cast? Such a lovely cast.
Yeah, and you know, when you suggested a Christmas movie with Bruce Willis, I thought it was going to be the other one. I think he's all right in this, actually, Bruce Willis.
Yeah. Did you know he was so keen to do this. He'd worked with Benton before on Billy Bathgate. He was so keen to do this that even though his standard fee was $15 million, he took the scale wage of $1,400 a week.
Oh, right, cool.
To do this.
And apparently he's an extra in The Verdict.
Yes.
So he'd worked with Newman before as well.
Yeah, and he brought that up to him, and they went and looked at a tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's not credited at all. He's not credited on the posters or the opening credits.
It's supposed to be like a surprise, I guess.
Yeah, but he's really good, isn't he?
Yeah, he's really good.
I'm slightly distracted because he's still at the point where he's not quite honest about his hair. You can just see a very suspiciously clean hairline.
Sure. It looks like doll's hair a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, but he is. I mean, sorry, that's really mean and superficial.
But you are a gentleman that's follically challenged, so
yes,
I think
but interestingly,
you're looking for the solidarity more than anything. Yeah. You're not criticising him, you're waiting for him to come out of the closet.
Yeah, exactly. And when I look at this movie, it was interesting because I was looking at Pruitt Taylor Vince in it. And he has my hair.
Yeah, that's it.
That's more honest.
Yeah, if you're being generous to yourself.
But without being mean to Bruce Willis, he's really good in it. He manages to harness his swagger.
Yeah, that's it. It feels like they've sort of dubbed in his giggle at one little point when they enter the Paul Newman's family home, and you hear a little giggle in the background. It just felt like, what was that? Like contractually obliged, yeah.
And I guess he is supposed to be an irritating character.
Yeah, so, but it doesn't. He never drops it. He just sort of maintains the kind of integrity of the character. He's never vain about that performance, which I thought was really good. Yeah,
Melanie Griffith.
Yeah, really good as well. Really vulnerable and.
Yeah, I mean, the notes I got was like deliberately kind of domestic and unglamorous. Sweatshirts, jeans, hair tied up, and as a performance, it's kind of like comfortable and open and relaxed. I think, again, she's doing terrific work in this because she was coming off a pretty bad career slump after a few years after Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah, but this, I don't know, I just feel like she's playing the character. Like, again, there's no vanity to it. She's vulnerable, and I think the character is kind of putting on a brave face and always smiling and outwardly joyous, but you also feel like the sadness that's underpinning her day-to-day life. I just thought it was, you kind of get it all, and you never see the actor.
Pruitt Taylor Vince. He's one of my favourite faces.
He's great, isn't he?
I'm always happy to see him in something, unless there's just a few too many times that he's been typecast as twitchy killer.
Yeah, sure.
In a few things.
The first thing I ever saw him in was the X-Files.
Oh, right, okay. I was lucky. I saw him in Heavy.
Heavy, yeah, okay.
That was. I mean, I must have seen him in other things, but I saw him in Heavy, and I thought that was. I mean, that's a companion piece for this movie. I thought that was such a lovely performance.
Yeah, he's great.
That when I see him next in something like, I don't know, Identity, where he's just, they're using his twitchy eyes as lazy signposting for Crazy Person. He's just a wonderful actor.
Yeah, that's it. He's got a good solid career, hasn't he?
Yeah, but it's weird. He had the best early CV of anyone I've ever looked at. Because I IMDb'd him. Like, his first screen performance, even though his scenes were deleted, was Jim Jarmusch's Down by Law.
Oh, really?
Then you're talking about Angel Heart,
wow.
Shy People, which is a well-liked Andrei Konchalovsky movie, Barfly, Mississippi Burning, an episode of Miami Vice, and he was in Wild at Heart. I don't remember him in Wild at Heart at all.
No, I don't either.
and that's leading up to Heavy. Well, this and then Heavy immediately afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Which must have been like his big breakthrough performances. I could talk about Pretty Elements all day.
That's a Christmas special.
Yeah.
Well, Philip Seymour Hoffman, obviously.
Yeah.
It's really nice. You know, he's only on screen for 2 or 3 minutes, but it's so impactful and quite sort of crazed.
But it's an odd performance for him because he's very rarely a bully, isn't he? And he's like channeling that kind of...
He's super masculine, you know, really threatening and just a little bit stupid.
Yeah, and he does that thing which... It's that thing that he does in a lot of performances, that kind of open-mouthed, hesitant, slightly stupid expression that he does. But it means something different with each performance.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's kind of like a you know, your standard small-town bully stupidity.
Yeah.
That kind of wet-lipped, open mouth.
Yeah, there's a lovely moment where he's gone too far, and then like you can see it all on his face, where his face literally says, "I've gone too far."
Yeah, I completely forgotten he was in this. And the name came up on the credits. Oh, right, yeah. Jessica Tandy, one of Stoke Newington's most famous.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you got the Stoke Newington fact in.
I am not of the generation that knows much about Jessica Tandy apart from...
I mean, I IMDb'd her, and obviously there's Driving Miss Daisy, and then I didn't really recognise much down the list, you know, lots of TV and that kind of stuff, but nothing really, didn't seem like anything significant.
I think that's a generational thing now. I think people who are 20 years younger than us could look at IMDb, and a lot of things that are significant to us would just be like background noise to them.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not suggesting that Jessica Tandy's career is background noise, but it's just she's been in so many things that have come and gone that just haven't been part of our experience.
Yeah, sure.
But she's lovely in this. She's just the epitome of the wonderful, cultivated, loving elder relative, isn't she?
Yeah, but good at kind of showing like the disappointment at her own child, and you know, there's again, you know, all of the characters have a lot of work to do, and they all do it very subtly and with a lot of understatement and nuance. You know, and she's great in it.
So now we come to the main course, Paul Newman.
Paul Newman, yeah, I mean, bloody hell, he's so good in it, isn't he?
I'm really looking forward to seeing more Paul Newman films as an adult, because when you're growing up, I mean, this is something that you know, you skim through the reviews for this movie, and Roger Ebert said that he was so much a part of the landscape of American film that you stop noticing how good an actor he is.
Yeah, right.
For me, you know, growing up, he was so much a part of the landscape of just pop culture that you just don't really notice him, and he seems like something your parents are into.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't know what your Newman experience is, but mine is pretty much like the Towering Inferno, and maybe going back to Butch Cassidy, but a lot of kind of, you know, just stuff that's on TV, and you know, I never hunted down a Paul Newman movie until like recently. It
didn't help that his legendary movies were before my time, effectively, and then the movies that I mean, we're grouping this in with them, and obviously this is a very good movie.
So I guess my point is that everything that I've gone and watched that he's in, he's good in everything. You know, from playing Doc Hudson in Cars to, you recommended The Verdict, which like he blew me away in that, and then I watched Twilight just as an aside, and he was excellent in that. You know, whenever you put a Paul Newman film on, like, he's going to be excellent. I remember actually as a kid watching Slapshot, the ice hockey movie. That was one of the films that all the kids at school were watching, so that was probably my first Paul Newman, followed by Towering Inferno.
Okay.
So there's like, he had a whole career before that point. You know, that was his kind of like, I don't know, late period before this kind of last renaissance, but he didn't stop working. Well,
that's the thing. All the movies that were coming out in the 80s, even when you look back on them now, like 80s and early 90s that are in, don't look like particularly appealing or good films, which I think was part of the thing that kept me at a distance from it. Yeah. There's a lot of sort of absence of malice type things, and I'm not judging that film because I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it either.
But you look at it,
I bet it is though, or I bet at the very least he's going to be good in it. Yeah,
so it's one of the journeys of discovery I'm looking forward to in the next few years, is watching more Paul Newman. Because my God, he's fantastic.
He's so good in this.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even question the fact, because you know at this point he's like a Hollywood legend, and he's been around for, you know, half a century at this point. And this, you put on Nobody's Fool, and, you know, it's just the character. You know,
yeah, you are meeting someone.
Yeah, that's it. He comes through the door. It's a really sort of that's it. His entrance into the film. He just walks through a door, you know, into an old lady's, and just sort of starts sort of jabbering on about whether she died in her sleep, and you know, it's a little bit kind of direct, and yeah, I don't know. It's just the character. You're just looking at Sully, aren't you? That's it. in all of my notes, sometimes you get mixed up with the character and the actor. Never. I just wrote Sully all the way through.
I've got just Sully and Sully and Sully and.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about the movie itself and go through it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's this idea that you go through scene by scene and look at each line of dialogue, and I think I could quite easily do that with this movie. I've made copious amounts of notes, but the point that I would always be referring back to is this idea that you're watching a film that's so intricately written and played that it feels like you're just observing life, and it just passes by without any real gravitas. But because the film is so well made, everything that people say or do has a consequence, or it pays off nicely at the end of the film. And I think that's one thing, I can't think of a way to really celebrate that, by going through. I think I'd probably end up neutralizing the impact by reading every single line of dialogue and every sort of character pivot. But I just was so amazed that by the end this whole thing wraps up so neatly, and it's not contrived.
No, and it doesn't wrap up in terms of bringing things to like a third act conclusion. It just kind of settles, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, and it's still quite grim in places. One of the characters has betrayed his entire community and probably has resulted in a large amount of bankruptcies and had a really devastating effect. But it's also kind of saying, I think, that stuff, while it is important to people's lives, the things that help us cope are the people around us.
Yeah. I watched it for the third time. I had to watch it twice this week, obviously once to watch it again for the first time in years, and then another time just to kind of make notes. When I was making notes, one thing I did notice is it feels effortless when you're watching it, but when I was breaking down the scenes and making notes on stuff for certainly for the first, inverted commas, act of the movie, it's just brilliantly economical in structure. You have a credits montage which is just fades in and out of black onto scenes in this. Is it North Bath?
North Bath.
So you're thinking you're just seeing sort of scene setting stuff.
Postcards, in the snow.
But within that, just within the credits montage, there's stuff that pays off later in the film.
Exactly, yeah.
You see wide shots and stuff, and you see, what look like anonymous kind of establishing shots.
But also what they're doing, even in the structure of the opening titles, they're stepping from the bleak countryside. They step to the edge of town, and then they step into town.
And when you come into town, you see, an old house on Bowden Street, which is very significant to the story. Yeah. And then you see kind of a street with a banner for the Ultimate Escape theme park, which is going to...
So much information there already.
Then you see Rub leaving home, and then you see the Iron Horse bar, and then you see the old woman wandering out of the diner.
Yeah, that's it, Hattie.
Wandering out into the snow and being kind of dragged back in.
Yeah.
And all these things are going to pay off later in the film, and you don't know it.
It's great.
But then, I was making notes on what each scene was as we go through, and each one is just a very precise introduction to Sully's relation to every character.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel forced. It's only watching it the third time and wanting to make notes that you see this stuff.
Yeah, you see the threads. Yeah, there's no padding there at all. Everything is part of the story. Everything that you see. Even the cutaways are significant. They're not there to just pad a scene or to bridge between scenes. Each of them gives you a little story point.
Whilst we've just talked about the credits montage, I just wanted to get this note in, and there's no real way to kind of shoehorn it in anywhere else.
It's happening.
Location shoot at the appropriate time of year. Real snow, real cold breath.
I think it was a blizzard that year as well, wasn't it? They said it was pretty tough work.
But it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Because these days, these young people...
These days, green screen.
But yeah, there's moments when you're watching something and it's cold, and you're just looking at it going, digital breath, digital breath. Or you see, and it's a film I like very much, A Most Violent Year.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which is set in winter, and there are some scenes early on with some dreadful digital snow added in. But it's just the bonus of having a great location at the right time of year.
Oh yeah.
It's the lighting and the weather and everything. And it must have been quite uncomfortable, but
yeah, good though. It's definitely authentic, isn't it? there's a really nice introduction to Miss Beryl here, the old lady, looking out of the window as a branch comes off the tree next door, crashes through a bird bath, and then she talks to the picture of her dead husband, Clive Senior, saying how it feels like God is getting closer and closer to taking her away.
Maybe this is the year he drops the boom.
Drops the boom, yeah. I mean, the film's dedicated to Jessica Tandy, and I think she passed away before it was completed. I don't think she saw it.
It's one of her last films, yeah.
There's that nice thing where she keeps saying to Paul Newman, like, can I get you a cup of tea? And he's like, not now, not ever, and just sort of stuck to his guns.
Yeah, and it's just the daily... I mean, they've been living there for decades, hasn't it? It's just the daily banter between them.
But it pays off beautifully at the end, again, when she says it to him after he's gone through all of this story in the film and all of his interaction with all the other characters, and he gets home to her house, and she says, can I get you a cup of tea? And he's like, not now, not ever. And she just says, like, I think one day, I just imagine you're going to change your mind. And he's like, you imagine that about me? Like, you can see it plays on his mind. Wow. She's still optimistic about him when,
Yeah, I mean, I'll just whittle through the early scenes, but jump in if you've got...
Yeah. I mean, for me, I just sort of bullet pointed about Rub. The nickname is like Rubberhead, isn't it? Which I think...
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Bruce Willis calls him Rubberhead at the
okay.
At the card game. Is again a throwaway line, which I only caught second time round. And then I don't know if they never allude to it in the film, but he has a scar across his forehead, which is that supposed to indicate that maybe he took a bump or something?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's played so subtly that you don't know if he's kind of suffered some sort of injury, or if he's just
Yeah, I mean, some of the reviews at the time called him like slightly retarded.
Yeah, Roger Ebert kind of it used the phrase twice, and it makes you wince.
Yeah,
his mentally retarded best friend.
Yeah, exactly. I think he feels a little bit autistic. There's that scene where there's a really nice convergence between Philip Seymour Hoffman, Paul Newman, and Pruitt Taylor Vince as they're he's following. They've had a little domestic, and he storms off, and he just keeps walking, and all this shooting and stuff's happening behind him.
Yeah, a nice little cutaway to him just walking away.
Just still, stubbornly sulking off, which made me think, maybe he's a little autistic.
And I guess the biggest scene out of these is Sully and Carl. Bruce Willis character. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit in this, but their relationship here, they're kind of at odds at this time point, but I do get the feeling they were kind of like old friends, and they got on a lot better in the past.
But I also get the impression that Sully was friends with Carl's dad.
Okay.
There's that sequence where he talks about hard work, and he says, you never worked hard for this, it was given to you by your father, who broke his back making sure that you had something to inherit, and then you've wasted it all on ski trips. And then he's like, I haven't been skiing for 2 years. There's quite a sort of pettiness to it, and in the moment it feels quite spiky and quite pointed, but the fact that he's walked into the office, helped himself to a cup of coffee, he's obviously super comfortable there, and the first we've heard of this character is in the courtroom, where he's talking about trying to get money out of Tip Top Construction for an injury that he sustained falling off scaffolding.
But I get the feeling that prior to that injury they probably got on a lot better, and there's like the basis of this spikiness is based on a friendship gone sour. Yeah,
but then Bruce Willis's character Carl, he's been cheating on his wife, and later on we see him sleeping on Sully's couch.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
It's a lovely detail there.
It's just one of those little unspoken things that gives you so much more about the relationship.
Yeah. There's a really nice moment where we see his secretary run out of an adjoining office, and she has like stubble rash on her chin, and her chin's bright red. You don't often see like those kind of details. I just thought that was really nice. And they talk about Carl having had a heart bypass recently, and spent a lot of money on that, and also being a little bit panicky and insecure. And
I mean, he's covering up a lot with his bravado, isn't he? But, so there's an odd moment immediately after that. It's one of the things that stuck out to me on my third viewing, I suppose. So Sully reluctantly takes some work from Carl because he doesn't have any other work, shifting breeze blocks onto the back of his truck, and there's like what's quite an odd moment for this film. It's like a little sort of fantasy moment.
He's talked about it previously, hasn't he, about punching him through the window.
But then you get kind of like little fantasy moments of Carl flying through windows, which is it's one of the two little odd moments in this film. I think this one doesn't quite work for me this time
Yeah, they
around.
could have done without it, but I mean, it's also quite nice to see, like, Bruce Willis doing his own stunt, isn't he? Crashing through the window, falling a story at least. Due to his knackered old truck getting a puncture, he has to hitchhike back into town, and the person that picks him up is his son, who has been living away for years and has just come back for Thanksgiving. And
Well, he does say it's been 3 years since he's seen him, so I think they've kind of bumped into each other a lot over the years, but not had any contact really. Is it Dylan Walsh, the actor?
Yeah.
He's a funny-looking actor, isn't he? I found him difficult.
A little bit, yeah, 80s, late 80s, early 90s looking.
Yeah.
He looks a bit like Clark Kent.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, right.
He looks like Tim Sale's version of Clark Kent.
Yeah.
With the massive square jaw and the enormous beef-fed body.
But then also, what I think is quite good is that when you look at Paul Newman, who's obviously very handsome, and then you look at the woman that's playing his ex-wife, she's actually quite solidly built and quite upright and quite firm. And I think he's quite believable as their child. And obviously he's moved away from the small town and is a college professor, so he's kind of dressing that bit. But he does look like he's in disguise, doesn't he?
Yeah, it made it difficult for me to warm to his character initially. Every time I've watched it, because he literally does look like your archetypal beefy American. And it's quite a neutral, understated character as well, so there's little to cling to initially. This is not a criticism, it's just my prejudices coming to the fore.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so Peter is his estranged son and has, from this very first introduction, somewhat fractured family life.
But none of it's kind of melodramatic, and later on when his wife goes back to the city, it's just happened. We don't see any big row, we don't see any sort of meltdown, but from this little dynamic inside the car with the two children taking sides with the parents. And
it's quite nice, Sully's reaction to having Wacker, the little grandson, hurt his leg. He's quite,
he's livid, isn't he?
He's livid. He is really quite angry.
Stop the car. And it's like,
and he isn't,
son of a bitch or something calls him, doesn't he?
He isn't like a soft edges, grouchy movie old man. He is generally angry.
Yeah. He's in a lot of pain, I think. So the next scene is the introduction to Carl's wife, Toby, which I find a little bit distracting, her having like a guy's name.
Do you find that distracting in life? Do you find it difficult?
Well, it's not something that's keeping me up, but
when you meet a girl called Charlotte who calls herself Charlie, do you find it difficult to talk to her?
Well, but Toby's not short for anything, is it? It's not an abbreviation.
No, that's true.
Yeah, that's like a guy's name. Well, Princess Michael. I always found that distracting.
I do like the fact that in most of the scenes she's in, there's something more serious going on that's occupying her attention.
Yeah.
In this case, she's busy having the locks changed and throwing out Carl's clothes because she knows that he's cheating on her. But in all of these scenes, she's doing something else, and that's taking up her attention. But Sully kind of warms to him, and eventually her attention turns to him, and you do get the feeling there's this kind of quiet flirtation between them.
Yeah, that's it.
Always captured.
Yeah, that's it. It's a sort of a genuine flirtation, isn't it?
And she's genuinely sort of charmed by him.
Yeah, and he's definitely a welcome distraction from the grief that she's dealing with every day with having Carl as a husband.
I do think it's quite nice as well that even when Sully's talking to Toby, he's not pushy, and he's always kind of sympathetic to Carl. There's a scene later on where he's stealing Carl's snowblower, and he's talking to Toby, who's leaning out the window, who's caught him doing it, and he's saying, give him another chance. He's always sympathetic to him, and not trying to cut in and deliberately steal his wife, but
that's it.
He's always trying to kind of.
Well, if you imagine that he was friends with Carl's father, I think he's still respecting his friend's son or something, and maybe there's, one of the main points of the film is Sully trying to reconnect with his son, his own son, and his grandson, and maybe there's something about Carl's character that he feels a little bit responsible for as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Poker at the Iron Horse.
Yeah.
So this is where kind of introducing all the relationships between Sully and the different characters individually.
I love it. Yeah, after seeing all that, all of that kind of interaction, and then suddenly they're just all at the table together.
All in the same room.
It's a nice sort of spiky actorly scene as well, isn't it? They all get kind of cool lines of dialogue, and it's really nice.
And it's the first time that you get to see kind of a sense of the town interaction. It's kind of like a microcosm of the town, how everyone's kind of dependent on each other.
Yeah.
And despite, all their kind of slight grievances and differences, they're all kind of in it together and working together and playing together. And it's great to see the chief of police playing a backroom poker game as if nothing's going on.
Look, I know we didn't do so good today, but there's a zillion things we can try.
Nope. When was the last time you won a case, Will?
What's that got to do with anything?
Cut.
Red River around a green monkey's ass.
Sully, you're the only guy I know still dumb enough to believe in luck.
I used to believe in brains and hard work till I met you.
Deal. 7 card.
Which one of your fancy doctors advised you to drink, smoke, and screw your brains out?
Those are unreasonable requests, Sully. They wouldn't have made them if they didn't know me.
If they'd known you, they wouldn't have fixed you.
Here you go, Jacko.
King bets.
I think the next major scene that I would talk about is when we're introduced to Clive Jr., Beryl's son. He takes her and his investors for lunch at the local country club, and you immediately get a sense of him as kind of a social climber and a fairly unpleasant person.
But also, well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. But also that sort of thing of a small town. He's head of the bank. They call him the bank. He's the local bank manager. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think he owns the bank. Do you think he owns the bank?
No, I think he just runs it and advises.
Yeah, that's it. And so this is his opportunity to go from being, a modest fish to being a big fish. If he can bring in this $100 million theme park into the local area, property values will go up. He'll be,
He'll be, the king of the town.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he will have been the man that changed everybody's fortunes, and he's backed like one horse.
It's quite interesting at this point that this is the first time we've not been with Sully.
Yeah.
When we're with Clive Jr. And then you cut to another scene as well, which is his son Peter at his mother's Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
again,
that's
it's like we've spent a couple of scenes without Sully, which feels a little odd at first.
Yeah, you miss him, don't you?
Yeah.
Where's Sully? But then he's actually outside, isn't he, at the Thanksgiving?
So yeah, in the spirit of not doing it absolutely scene by scene, just jump forward a little. And there's an important scene later where Sully finds his grandson Will hiding in the back of his truck.
Yeah, that's right.
After a huge Thanksgiving ruck
catastrophe
he sneaked away from, and takes him to the Cozy Corner diner and has a little chat with him.
Yeah, he's waiting for Peter to come and collect Will and take him home. And Will, being a kid, he's very open about his parents' impending divorce and how the family's going to be split, one child with one parent and the other with the other, so on.
I really enjoyed this time round noticing how, we're talking about in terms of the character, how Sully, because part of this film is about Sully learning to, warming to having a family, having family connections,
taking responsibility for it as well.
Yeah, like he's very friendly and pleasant to Will from the start, but he's quiet and cautious, and he isn't trying to forge bonds.
Yeah, the scene ends with it's a really powerful moment where his son says to him, "Did you think about me?" And he says, from time to time, and he's like, "Well, I thought about you every day." It was mad to be abandoned by your father. It's troubled this boy his whole life. And when he asks his father, "Did you think about me?" He's like, "Yeah,
But it's the fact that he isn't gushing and he isn't giving it, but he's absolutely honest. But
yeah, that's it. He still plays it like that as well, and you can see as Will's talking to him about the divorce, he's just like, okay, yeah, I can see, recognise some of this, and I can sort of piece it together, and it's that point of, should he engage? Am I going to get involved in this? Is this my business?
Yeah. And if I get involved in some way, is this going to backfire at all?
Is it going to be a saga? Am I? Is it worth it? I think all of that stuff's playing across his.
Well, what I think about Sully as well, though, is that it's not just that he doesn't want to get involved out of self-interest. It's just that he knows that he's affected people's lives badly.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want to step in and make things even worse again.
Yeah, there's a throwaway line later on, isn't there, when Carl says to him, oh, this person's going to be crying, and as your ex-wife will testify, you don't handle
that too well, yeah.
Yeah, so there's that, like the whole town knows. That's the thing. It's not like he's run away to a new place and started a new life. The whole town still knows who he is.
And immediately after that scene, there's just a brief interlude where Sully parks outside a broken down old house, and I think that the mood of the scene we've just watched kind of informs the fact that this house is significant to him feeling troubled about family relationships
and his history and the past and these kind of things that we feel like he doesn't really spend much time thinking about, but actually there is an echo of the past that's troubling him. It's unresolved.
And this is just a moment that sets up something that pays off later in the film.
And there's a couple of nice scenes to do with the snowblower, hunting down the snowblower and nipping in to see Toby again. One little moment that I think stands out nicely in the middle of this stealing the snowblower sequence is Peter says to Sully, Mum's biggest fear is that your life has been fun. And he just says to Peter, tell her not to worry. This idea that it's been really tough actually living hand to mouth and, being... he looks like he's a free agent, he hasn't got a care in the world. But I think maybe as a young man that's a nice way to live. But I think as you get older...
40 years down the line, 30 years down the line...
Your body's failing, you've got no money in the bank, you're still living hand to mouth as you approach retirement age. There's tons of little dialogue moments that, raise a giggle. There's a really nice one with Sully when he's talking to Carl, and he says, I used to believe in hard work and brains until I met you. There's loads of those little moments, but the one I really loved was when
the scene we've just discussed.
Yeah, where they're about to steal the snowblower, and Sully has convinced his son to climb over a chain link fence to steal the snowblower, and he just says to him,
"Don't get stuck. Don't get stuck. That's it." My father walks out on his family when I'm a year old. All my life I've been waiting for him to show up and act like a father. So here I am, finally with my dad, together at last. Quality time, right? And what are we doing? Breaking and entering. What are his words of wisdom? Don't get stuck.
And then it's kind of the next day, and we have
something that was queued up in the credit sequence.
Clive Jr.'s trying to get his mum to sell up the house and invest in the real estate near to the theme park. Yeah, that's pretty cold, isn't it? Trying to get your mum to sell a house for your investment.
I get the feeling there's been sort of that sort of chicanery throughout his entire life.
You think he's always been after the family treasure trove?
Yeah, I think Sully has such a low opinion of him, and it becomes clear later that pretty much everyone has such a low opinion of him, that I think there must be some sort of, as I say,
he's been sneaking around in Sully's room, hasn't he?
Yeah. So Clive Jr. is pestering Miss Beryl to kick him out for no good reason other than...
cigarette butts, he says.
Yeah,
that he's going to start a fire.
And here's the thing, though. He says everyone else in town can see through him except you, but that's completely undercut.
He's talking about
by
himself, really, isn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah. He's projecting.
And then there's a wonderful scene after that. Miss Hattie, who we've seen wandering out of the diner and being dragged back in by presumably her daughter. Miss Beryl notices her wandering through the streets in the snow again, and sends Sully out to get her, and he kind of charms her back into the diner.
But he goes out barefoot, doesn't put his coat on. It's the middle of winter, and Clive Jr. is stood right there, and Miss Beryl doesn't ask her son to go after him. She knows that he's not responsible enough, even for that.
And then once he's charmed Miss Hattie in, one of my favourite details in the entire film is the fact that when her daughter, who runs the diner presumably, takes her back, he automatically puts an apron on and starts helping out in the diner.
Yeah, he has to, doesn't he? She says take an apron, and what he wants to do is have a cup. He's freezing cold, wants to have a cup of coffee instead. He has to start serving food.
But he does it without complaint, apart from not even time for a cup of coffee, and joins in. And then by complete contrast, Clive Jr. turns up to pester him and about nonsense, and it's just It's
a nice small town diner scene, and it's played lovely.
But what it does for me as well, it gives you a glimpse of the sort of the steel in Sully's character.
Yeah, true.
He does get angry, and he doesn't. He doesn't bully him, but he doesn't take any bullshit from Clive Jr.
Yeah, he does.
Puts him in his place.
Yeah, and he does say, your mother is the only reason you haven't taken a kicking, basically.
And I do like that, the fact that, you know, this is a feel-good movie, and you run the risk of softening the character too much. But, you know, he does have steel. He is quite tough when he needs to be.
Yeah, yeah. And you get that later on as well. Some of the scenes with Rob, where Rob's like, oh, I just want it to be the two of us working together. And he's like, look, he's my son. Okay, you know, I'm trying to do this now. Stop whining, basically. Stop your belly aching.
Yeah.
You know, he can be quite tough with people as well. Same
Yeah,
way.
do it because I say so.
Yeah, yeah, and he punches out the policeman. You know, it's.
Yeah. So immediately after the diner scene, there's a lovely scene in the Iron Horse, which I'm not going to go into in detail, but it's very funny. The screenplay does this really, you know, the terrific thing where it softens you up with humour, and then it'll take you somewhere quite dark, and it's twice as powerful because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the following scene is Sully and Peter doing their sort of light bonding, drugging a dog, and stealing back the snowblower. But then that kind of shades into darkness when they drop by the house at Bowden again.
That's it. So yeah, that scene that you mentioned of him sitting outside alone, this old house, pays off beautifully when he takes his son to see his childhood home, and just says like, this is where I grew up, and the experience of your grandfather was a brutal alcoholic man who made my mother, this tiny woman, fly. The way he says that, you know, it's like those pictures are so vivid in his mind from that abusive childhood that he's never really come to terms with that.
What I like about it also is that at the end, you know, when Sully shared this and Peter's taken it in, there isn't any instant forgiveness. You know, Sully says, you know, about his father. He says, you know, fuck him forever, and then he turns to him, trying to lighten the mood, says to Peter, I guess you'd say that about me someday. And he says, you'll say that about me when I'm gone. And he's like, you were gone, and I've already said it. Wow, it's so good, isn't it? God, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, that's a brilliant piece of dialogue. But it doesn't, you know, this is a feel-good movie, but it doesn't tie scenes up neatly with forgiveness instantly.
Yeah, I mean, there is something in Peter's character all the way through the film that he is sort of light and happy to be engaged with his father, but he also does leave a few barbed comments.
Yeah.
You know, and it makes a point of his kind of resentment, and there's a little bit of jealousy when Will, his son, is getting more attention than he does from his own father. You know, and you know, he says it. You know, I'm trying now. You know, that's all I can do. You know,
in terms of like the structure of and writing as well. I mean, another thing I like is that it sets things up. It sets up antagonisms, which in another movie you'd expect it to spin its wheels and resolve it. You know, half an hour later. Yeah. But it'll resolve them, or if not resolve them, it'll soften them in the next scene. Yeah. So there's that other scene later on where, well, we'll come to it, but there's a scene where Peter is again angry at his father, and you think, okay, well, this is the second act. You know, get them up the tree, and then you'll get them down the tree in the third act. But no, it's kind of partially resolved in the next scene. I really like that. It's really unpredictable in the writing. You know, you're not going to get these cliched character arc structures.
Which I think it is where it's really clever, that it does a lot of the structural requirements of a film, but also maintains the kind of honesty of real life.
There's a lovely little character moment at the end of this evening that Sully and Peter spend together, and it's just, again, it's another thing I like about the character, the fact and the way that Paul Newman plays him is the fact that he expresses pleasure. You know, there's a bit at the end where he's just enjoyed the evening, and he just kind of like pounds the truck twice just because he's had a good evening.
Yeah, that's it. That's sort of his good luck token as well.
Yeah, there's a really nice moment as well with where Sully takes Will out for a few hours, you know, whilst he goes about his daily rounds at work, and there's a scene with him. He lets him drive the truck.
Oh yeah, that's lovely.
But I mean, it's a really straightforward scene, but it's just the pleasure on his face.
Yeah, but you know what it is? It's not the driving that gives him pleasure. It's the fact that he drives that knackered old truck that everybody hates. And his grandson, when he's saying, why is the steering wheel so shaky? And he's like, oh, it's a really old truck. And he's going, I like this truck.
It's a nice truck.
Yeah.
He's just...
And he beams, doesn't he? Because nobody's ever said that to him before. You know, you've had Philip Seymour Hoffman saying, this death trap, you know, your truck is a piece of shit. I want it off the road. I want it out of the town, you know. And just to have this little boy say, I like this truck. It's a nice truck. It really touches him. It's beautiful.
There's the lovely scene with Toby when she's back with Carl working in Tip Top Construction's office.
Because she doesn't know that that's his grandson either.
Yeah, and he's really, really reluctant to show that he has a grandson.
Can't say it.
And kind of hiding his grandson and not admitting to who he is. And
being that old, to being so old that he's got a grandson to this young lady. That scene does end really nicely where she flashes her boobs at him and he's stunned, isn't he?
Stunned and doesn't know what to do or say.
And then we just hear Will saying, "What's the matter, Grandpa?" And then she just mimics Will going, "What's the matter, Grandpa?" And he just has to leave, doesn't he?
Again, sorry to get technical, but amazing screenplay construction, because you go from that scene into possibly the second darkest scene in the film, where you go to the house on Bowden again.
Oh yeah,
with Carl, and I think it's a phenomenal scene.
Yeah, it's really good.
Bruce Willis is doing all the talking in the background, and Paul Newman is just experiencing everything all over again.
Yeah, you feel like he hasn't stepped through that door.
It's absolutely devastating, and for me the reason that it works so well is because you've been softened up so much with the previous scene.
Yeah, and then there's also like a little subplot to even this scene where Sully has left his grandson outside, who's only barely 4 or 5 years old, and he forgets that he's there. Obviously he's he's reliving his own childhood trauma at the same time as he's adding to his grandson's childhood trauma in a much lighter way, but still he's forgotten that he's out there, and the little boy's terrified.
This is the point again where I mentioned it before, it opens up a little rift between Sully and Peter. I should have known you'd never change. Which is quite heavy-handed, I thought. But he's protecting his kid, isn't he? I think he's just reacting in the moment. All of that stuff that's been built up over decades, of neglect. Well, I've got that note again that I mentioned before. Economy in a lesser film, this would have been dragged out for the rest of the movie. But in the following scene, you get Sully comes to try and make amends, but to.
Oh yeah, it's the very next scene, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the very next scene.
Ding dong, and he's at the door. He's like, "I want to speak to my grandson,"
and manages to reassure Will somewhat. And
just
builds another bridge with Peter.
Yeah, that's it. But also, again, it's not just about concluding that arc. The idea of giving his grandson a stopwatch that he can use to time himself when he needs to be brave. It feels like a nice way of just saying, "Oh look, I'm sorry about this, sorry about that, blah blah blah." But then it pays off nicely at the end, where he's got the lawyer's leg and he has to give it back, and he sets the stopwatch, and it's probably the biggest Hollywood moment where people in the bar stop to turn around and look at this little boy carrying a leg through a bar. But it's still a really nice. It's a Christmas film. That is one of the Christmas moments.
Yeah. So the next scene is Miss Beryl's stroke, and it has the other moment I was talking about, which is slightly odd for this, but I think it's quite beautiful and effective the way it works. You have her kind of sitting down to a cup of tea, and the camera pulls back, and it seems to be snowing inside the room. Yeah,
that's it. There's a nice sort of this like sparks that you hear about when you're having a stroke. You start to see like lights before your eyes, and it's that, isn't it? That little twinkle.
I kept expecting, because it's quite light snow at first, I kept expecting to pull back and for the frame.
Fincher,
Well, no, for the frame to be wider and expect that we would have been seeing this through a window, because it is snowing quite heavily outside. But no, it actually is kind of like snow within the room.
Yeah, it's a really nice little detail there, actually.
Do you feel that at this point this might be the sort of tragic turning point in the script? But
because he comes barreling in, doesn't he, and says, "Oh, you died in your sleep, old girl," and then she's on the floor, and you think, "Oh shit, maybe she has."
What I really, really like, and what I think is one of the quiet, unspoken key moments in their relationship, is the fact that your next cut is to Sully waiting in the hospital, and you realise this is where just within that cut that he is her son. Really, he's more her son than Clive Jr. ever was. He's he's waiting for her in the hospital. He's absolutely, terrified.
He's committed.
But I think it's wonderful that she's up and about, and this isn't a tragic turning point for the movie.
She's
just
totally
a
fine.
minor stroke.
A minor stroke. Yeah, she's out the next day, and she's saying like, "Don't tell my son." And he's like, "Well, I have to tell him. He's next of kin." And she's like, "No, he'll use this to put me in a home, and he'll never let me out. And I think that would kill me." And he's like, "Oh yeah, fair enough."
She uses that lovely metaphor to describe how she feels about Sully. She says, "You're talking about the trifecta bet that he's always putting into us. Has it ever paid off yet?" He says, "No, but you got to keep hoping." She says, "Well, that's how I feel about you. Watching that this time round, you sort of tear up.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Things have put that beautifully. Yeah, the odds have to kick in sooner or later.
Yeah, it's lovely, absolutely lovely. I guess if we're just sort of filing quickly through the next few scenes, you get Rob quitting his job because he's jealous of Peter. We get Officer Raymer turning up and discharging his weapon and then getting knocked out by Sully. And this is sort of how Sully ends up in jail over Christmas. Yeah. And Clive Jr. tries to use that as an excuse to get his mum to sell up. All of these things happen, but then sometime in the background, Hattie, the mother from the diner, it's called Hattie's Diner, so she must have been
right.
The original proprietor before passing on to her daughter. She's died, and it's her funeral, and Sully is let out of jail to attend.
Only in a small town
Yeah.
can a guy get out of jail to be a pallbearer.
But obviously, this being the mid-90s, he hasn't really kept up with what's going on in the communities, had no phone or internet access while he's been in jail, and the trifecta bet that he's been betting every day of his life has come in, but because he was in prison he didn't place the bet at the same time that the deal for the huge theme park that was promised as a massive investment in the local area has collapsed. Clive Jr.'s absconded, and each bit of news he gets while he's carrying Hattie's coffin makes him stop and turn around, and so the coffin
Almost
is going
drop the coffin.
Yeah, that's it. And the Undertaker's like, "Gentlemen, respect, please."
But it's one of those lovely. It's like the poker scenes. It's one of those lovely sort of community scenes as well, where you realise how kind of people bond and interact. It's a really nice. You don't get many big camera shots in this, but there's a really nice kind of crane shot to pull back and frame them as they're walking away. So you have this absolutely lovely scene between Sully and Rob.
Well, Sully's out of prison, and his first kind of chore that he does, that we see, is he goes to see his friend and just say, like, get some perspective. You're my best friend. Don't worry about my son. He's my son, and the relationships are different. They're not the same. And just the way he sort of puts that to him, breaks the ice by talking about, because it's so cold that the tip of his dick's going to stick to the stone.
They're sitting up. But again, it's Pruitt Taylor Vince just plays it so beautifully. He's so open, isn't he?
Yeah, when Sully says, "You're my best friend," there's just nothing else apart from this moment where Rob, he just tears up, like, to hear that, to feel validated that his position has worth, that somebody loves him like a best friend, and that was all he ever needed. And his response and reaction is he just, like, he doesn't move or do anything, but his eyes go, don't they?
Yeah.
It really puts a lump in your throat. I kind of hope that people would sit you down, all over the place and just say, "You're my best friend." You'd be like, "Oh my god." I always loved that thing in Curb Your Enthusiasm where Funkhauser would say to Larry, "You're my best friend." And Larry would just say, "You're not my best friend." "No, I'm not your best friend." No. Like, he didn't want that kind of closeness at all. And this has the opposite effect.
Did you notice that incredible bit of background location? Because it opens with this really nice shot. It kind of cranes up from Rob sitting on his doorstep in the cold, and it cranes up to a wide shot of the street as Sully's cars. Did you see the factory in the background?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
No, but it was one of those beautiful old buildings with, like, different coloured stained glass panes and everything. It's that's apropos of nothing at all, but I really like it.
Yeah, that's it. And then we're back into the second poker game. The tone is different because obviously Carl has lost the shirt off his back, and he's like, "Oh, why wouldn't this be the day where I lose every hand that I play?" And you can see the scar from his surgery, and just to sort of remind us what he's been through. And he
has his new secretary with him,
who's also lost the shirt off her back. Sully's winning, for the first time, it feels like. Now he's out of jail, maybe turned a corner, and he's winning at poker.
Yeah, and he's about to win big again, because Toby's finally had enough of Carl's affairs, and she turns up dressed in a beautiful red dress with tickets for her and Sully to go to Hawaii, the thing they've always fantasized about.
She's going to make it a reality for him. The doc says something like, "Damn, Sully,
when your luck turns,
it really turns." It's a really nice moment. Carl calls his bluff, doesn't he? He's like, "You won't do it. You're not that kind of guy."
Yeah, and also says, one of the things I didn't get until I saw it this time round is how ambiguous it is as to who's letting down who. Carl says, she won't go through with it. You may leave now, but you'll be over Kansas in a plane, and she'll start crying, and because she can never leave him. And I'd always thought, watching it before, that that had actually happened, and she was crying in the car, and Sully realised it wasn't going to happen. But as much of it really is as Sully explains to her, is that he can't do it either, because he realises that he has bonds that he didn't know about until recently.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? He's saying, I think I'm a father.
Yeah,
and a
grandfather and a best friend.
And a best friend, yeah. Like, he's saying it all out loud, like, for the first time. Yeah, and then he can't go with her, He gives her a kiss goodbye, and she says we would have been terrific together. And you sort of believe it, you believe that it's not just a compliment, that is one possible path that they could have taken, improvised a life in Hawaii.
It's interesting watching it as somebody in my 20s. It was, a disappointment that they didn't leave together. But it's only watching it as a grown adult, shall we say, that you realise how much of a betrayal that would have been of all the people that he's just built up his relationships with.
Yeah, and I have to say as well, this is one of those very rare occasions where you see an older man and a much younger woman together, and it doesn't creep you out. I don't know how you felt about it. I didn't, even when he kisses her, I didn't feel like, ooh, easy there, Grandad.
Well, I wonder if anything to do with that is because of the timelessness of Paul Newman.
Yeah, maybe.
He could always be anything between 40 and 60 whenever you watch him. But yeah, no, I think, you've built up the characters enough to like them.
That's it.
So then there's a kind of a 3-part scene in the Iron Horse later that evening where Sully's gone back and has continued drinking.
Yes, we get a line from Sully where he says something about being in prison meant that he wasn't able to give Peter his Christmas present, and he gives him a quarter and just says, like, call your wife. And you get this telephone reconciliation between Peter and his wife, and he asks his father if he can have a few days off work.
But it's nice realisation of Sully's there that, because I think Peter was quite enjoying the freedom for a while, and the respite.
Well, he was starting to settle into this small town life, and was looking at an apartment for him and his son, and that's it.
But he wasn't seeing what Sully was seeing, with the fact that he's in a way he's kind of repeating his father's mistake, he'd left one son behind. So it's quite a nice character moment that Sully's kind of realised that, and is perhaps putting his own kind of emotional well-being to one side.
Yeah, I think he likes having his son and grandson around, but he also realises that he can't
do that.
Make an intervention and somehow get this family back together.
And then Sully has a conversation with Worth in which he learns that Miss Beryl has paid all the back taxes on the house on Bowden Street, so the house is now his. And this is an incredible moment for Worth, because he's been kind of like a comedy character up to this point. He's been like relief. And at this point it becomes very serious. He says, like, when you see her, thank her and be grateful, or I'm done with you for good.
Yeah, that's it. It's his Christmas favour, isn't it? He says, here's one thing I want you to do, is be grateful.
I really liked the fact that in this scene, which is effectively between two people, you do get a really nice cutaway to the reaction from the landlady. The woman who's just been watching quietly.
She's just been a lovely presence all the way through as well. Another sort of reliable, face in the crowd.
And then we learn from Peter that Sully's trifecta ticket paid off.
Yeah, he played his father's trifecta ticket while he was in prison. He's going to get like just under $6,000, isn't he? So he's got his house back, and maybe, and again, this is pretty much where the film ends. But you've been given enough seeds to understand that he's got his house back. He's probably got enough money to restore it. He'll have a space where his son and grandson can come to visit. He's suddenly, it's still maintaining his independence, but also being more of a presence in the family.
Did you think that he would keep the house? I thought at that point, because I don't think that he would be strong enough. I mean, I know in the following scene he goes to collect his Christmas gift from Carl, which is the dog whose temperament he ruined.
Yeah.
I know he was more comfortable in the house at that point, but I didn't get the feeling that he would ever keep it. I thought he might sell it.
Well, yeah, he's got options, basically. The paying off the back taxes and winning some cash means that he's got some options. So if he doesn't restore the house, he'll get another house. He'll get something where his family can come and see him.
And the final scene, which again it's kind of like I wouldn't call it neutral pacing, but the undramatic kind of pacing of this movie means that you get to the final scene and it doesn't feel like it's not queuing you up for the final scene, is it? It's just another scene. It's the last scene between Miss Beryl and Sully as he comes home after this incredibly long day.
He's exhausted. She's asleep, isn't she?
It's kind of the middle of the night, and she lets him in and sits him down, offers him a cup of tea.
He's been fixing the handrail outside that he's been promising to do for the entire
whole movie.
Film. So he's just tagged that. It's like New Year now as well, isn't it?
Yes, but it's the last scene between them, and they have a conversation, and
there's something about the way that he talked to her and indirectly thanked her by saying, there's a room around town that you've been sticking your nose in where it doesn't belong, and you've done a good thing. And she responds something like, "I'm an old lady, that's my prerogative." And he's like, "Well, I forgive you." That's what he says to her. For paying off all of his debts, he says to her, "I forgive you," and she says, "Thank you." Like, it's a really nice playful moment between them.
Yeah, and rather than letting it, you always run the risk of it getting too sugary, but he's still quite a salty character, and it still kind of balances it out.
Yeah, but that's it. Then the dialogue is in kind of contrast to their eye contact, and it's just a really nicely played scene, I think, and it's a really nice moment to kind of step out of this small town and let the credits roll shortly after he falls asleep in the armchair, a cigarette in his mouth that she plucks away, and he's only managed to get one boot off and he's wiped out, but he does have that almost a smile on his sleeping face.
It's a smile of kind of sleeping contentment, and it's only when you get the slow fade to black that you realise this is the end of the film, and it's the perfect end.
Yeah, it's lovely.
So it's time for one of our kind of lame conclusions where we don't really wrap up properly.
Maybe we need to start a petition to get this onto everybody's Christmas watch list.
Yeah,
like a 4K restoration in cinemas every year at Christmas.
Maybe I should start writing it in big letters on the Prince Charles chalkboard downstairs.
Oh yeah, okay.
They do seem to put some rarities on. It's just really frustrating that something that is a classic, that is a fantastic film, isn't regarded that way. It's just not. Yeah,
it's disappeared, hasn't it? I don't think I'd even heard of it when you flagged it up.
I only heard of it. I only got to see it 97, 98 maybe, a few years after it came out, and I'd never heard of it then.
Yeah, sure.
And I picked it up on DVD, 3 or 4 years later. But it's just I'd never heard of it either.
Yeah,
it's just gone.
It's the kind of movie that the word "wonderful" was created for, isn't it? It's a wonderful piece of cinema. Nothing showy about it, but just really kind of delicate and detailed, and it's everything you want from a Christmas movie. It's a seasonal surprise.
Absolutely, there you go. There's a good end line. A seasonal surprise.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas
to one and all.